Okay.
Oh, is that what we're going to do?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Or those have names on them? It's a little funky.
So everyone's texting like Myra said, oh, watching on YouTube. Somebody posted the YouTube link on my Facebook page.
Oh,
Because I YouTube.
This was on. This was on.
Hello, everyone. We're going to get rolling.
It's like being on the floor of like the Senate, you know, with Congress people who are like just talking to nobody out there, right? But
Victoria and Peter are not.
Yeah, it's probably Victoria or Peter. Maybe Peter's not the time.
well, yeah, I didn't know. I've got no status updates whether they were still or so.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. How wonderful it is to be here. Welcome to the MFA Creative Writing Program's Dorothea Benton Frank Writing Series, the first event of the year. I'm Emily Roscoe, the director of the MFA program. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who are here in person for abiding by the college's mask requirement for COVID safety. And thank you for those of you who are tuning in virtually from the lovely convenience of your own home. So this afternoon, we are delighted to be able to celebrate the life and writing of the late Dottie Frank and to honor the generosity of her family for supporting this writing series. We will have readings and reflections from a few of Dottie's longtime friends. And then after, I hope you will check out Reunion Beach, an anthology of works inspired by Dottie Frank that is here for sale today. And then, after all of that concludes, we can move outside and have some refreshments and enjoy the sunshine. So now I'd like to introduce the introducer, Professor Brett Lott. You all are wonderful. It's such a great sign. I haven't said a word about him, and he gets the applause. It's wonderful. It speaks so well to how much he is loved here. He is the best-selling author of 14 books, including the novels Ancient Highway, The Hunt Club, A Song I Knew by Heart, and Jewel, an Oprah Book Club selection. Brett joined the English faculty here at the college back in 1986, and he took a 3-year hiatus from teaching to serve as the editor and director of the Southern Review at Louisiana State University. His next book is a nonfiction book, and it will be published in the summer of 22, and it's titled Cherries on the Golan, Olives in Jerusalem, a book about food and Israel, community, and hope. Please welcome Professor Brett Lott.
Hey, everyone. You people at home don't know it, but this room is jam-packed. Standing room only. I don't recognize anybody because we're all wearing these masks. But that was kind of a joke, only smaller. Wish we weren't wearing the masks, but I'm glad you guys are here. And I'm glad that Marjorie and Cassandra are here as well to celebrate Dottie. First off, I just want to say that this is like a day for Dottie. The weather has broken finally here in Charleston. It's been miserable. It's been this is the horrible summer, end of summer stuff. But today I went outside this morning, had a cup of coffee, and it's like this is the kind of day that Dottie lived for here in the Low Country. And so our gathering here. If you all see me at home looking out this way, there's nobody over there. They're all over here, so I'm going to keep my eyes over here now. But Dottie was a force of nature. Anybody who knew her knows that. I knew her from way back in, one day I got a call from Judge Sanders, who was the president of the college all the way back when, and he said that he had this young woman there who had just written a novel and wanted to know if I would blurb it, and that she'd gotten Pat Conroy to blurb it too. So would you blurb it? And if I got a call from my president, and the go-ahead from Pat Conroy, I thought, well, okay, I will blurb it, and I read it, and I was honored to have been, on the cover of that first novel of hers. And ever since then, her life was just one grand, beautiful trajectory, a comet. I think Gervais Haggerty's essay in Reunion Beach is called A Sparkling Comet, which is exactly what Dottie was. And she became sort of the saint of the MFA program, our patron saint. When we first started, we had our first event was an oyster roast at her house. No, it wasn't the oyster roast. Actually, it was a big dinner, catered dinner, and we blew the cannon off on the back porch, and we were all there and just had an incredible time. And then later that first semester, at the end, we had an oyster roast, and as part of the closing part of our semester with that first group of students, we had a reading at her house. This was all at their house out on Sullivan's. And the students all read a little bit of what they were working on, and it was a really kind of magical evening. And then at the end, Dottie asked if she could read something. She had not planned this, but she was there with us. We all read things. And she asked me, can I read something? And she went to her office and came back with some pages and stood there and read something from the novel she was working on at that point. It was just a really beautiful, beautiful evening. And with her passing, we lost a great piece of the energy to the MFA. That is not that we are lacking energy now, but it was really an important element of our time together. So we are having this afternoon to honor her through honoring a couple of really terrific writers who are sitting behind me, and it's my job to introduce them too. First off, though, there's a book called Reunion Beach. I believe it's for sale back here. It is, right? So Reunion Beach is this anthology. Reunion Beach was, there it is right there. This was going to be the title of her latest novel, the newest novel she was working on. And several of her beloved friends got together at the behest of her editor, Carrie Farron, and put together this beautiful book that is out there and available. Came out in April. Was it in April this year? Earlier this year? Something like that. And they're going to read from that to honor Dottie, but we're also going to hear from them their memories and whatever you want to call it, salutes to Dottie. Dottie would not have wanted anybody being mournful or anything. She would say, just get on with it. So I'm just going to get on with it. First off is Marjorie Wentworth, who Marjorie and Peter and I and my wife Melanie have had an ongoing non-dinner out for 30 years. Is that about right?
It's crazy.
Our kids were in karate way back in Mount Pleasant, and we were in Marjorie actually was driving. It was always like, let's go out to dinner. And it's just, you have kids, and trying to find time. And then now our kids are all gone, and we still haven't gone out to dinner. So one day we will. One day we will. I had the great honor of being inducted. One of the highlights of my career was with Marjorie and Dottie Frank. We all three were inducted into the South Carolina Academy of Authors Hall of Fame on the same night. It was a wonderful event. But Marjorie has written, here's the miracle about Marjorie's career. She actually is part of a book of poetry that appeared on the New York Times bestseller list, which really doesn't happen very often, that poetry shows up on the bestseller list. So that book is called Out of Wonder, Poems Celebrating Poets with Kwame Alexander and Chris Colderly. But beyond that, she's been a great voice for social justice, for just the presence of Charleston and the history and the importance of justice in Charleston, and at the same time, a wonderful poet. She's been 7 times nominated for I was going to say Pulitzer, but that's not quite what it was. The Pushcart Prize 7 times, which is pretty amazing. And then also Cassandra King Conroy, who has a bunch of novels that have been New York Times bestsellers, Books a Million, President's Pick, South Carolina Reader's Circle Book of the Month Club, Literary Guild. The accolades go on and on. And she is a terrific writer who, what's really cool about her is she's the widow of Pat Conway, but she's a writer in her own regard, with her own presence. And I just find that very moving. Pat Conway was very generous to me early on in my career. He blurbed a couple of my first books long time ago, and just to have Cassandra here on her own terms, she's a terrific writer, is a wonderful thing, but also as a representative of sorts of Pat Conway, who was very dear friends with Dottie as well. So without further ado, I've forgotten who's first. What's that? Alphabetical. Cassandra. All right. So here we go. Cassandra King Conway. Sorry, I flubbed that. I thought there was somebody first.
I hope you can hear me. I'm fairly soft-spoken anyway, Southern Belle thing. And so, plus, being muted through the mask. So I'll try to remember to make sure you can hear. So we were asked to do a reading from the book that came out this spring to honor Dottie. And when the editor talked to us about it, she had just said either have a character that's sort of based on Dottie, or maybe, try to do a writing style like hers or whatever. And so I kind of went for the character and wrote, my piece in here is a long short story called Low Country Stew. And so I just took some folks that are, my character in here that I'll be reading a short passage from is based on Dottie. And her name in here is Nellie B. And the basis of my story is also has some basis in something that really happened. And this is it had to have the beach in it. All right, we had all sorts of things laid out for us. Had to be something to honor Dottie in some way. Had to have beach, and had to be somehow about a reunion. So the year before Pat and I married, CNN did a special on the Conroy family, I guess one of the most famous dysfunctional families in the literary circles, and I got to attend. It was going to be around a dinner table, and we were going to have a dinner. So in this story, I imagined what would have happened, because Pat and I talked about it a lot, like, oh my God, you get this crazy dysfunctional family together around a table, everybody has a lot of wine, no telling what's going to happen. So that's how I imagined this. And I had in this, the character that's sort of based on Pat is a famous chef who has had a TV show and so forth, and he has married his second wife, who I guess is sort of based on me, because like all my characters that are based on me, she's beautiful and wise and, just all together, very put together, sophisticated and all that sort of stuff. So that's the woman that I married, named Chris. So my beach part is, I set this on Fripp Island. If any of you have been to Fripp Island. And the reunion is going to be they're doing a TV show on the chef who has retired, but this is it's kind of like with what CNN did with the Conroy family, to catch up with what's been going on with them. Okay. One thing I did also with this is that Dottie had a strong Irish background, and you can look at her and tell. So I made my characters Irish. Well, the character based on Dottie, Nellie B, and then her brother is the chef, and he's Bram O'Connor. So, and they're originally from Ireland. And the sister-in-law is not happy about the TV episode coming up, the reunion, because she is not happy that the former wife is going to be a part of it. So that's the premise. Chris is sitting on the beach when Nellie B comes up. Sister woman, I call out when she plops down in the chair next to mine, trying to lighten her mood. She's not having it. Don't you be sister woman me, she said, tossing her golf shoes on the sand. Not till I have a cold one in my hands, anyway. I pour mojito into one of the engraved silver mugs Bram gave me for a wedding gift at her suggestion and pass it to her. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm kind of skipping around. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Unlike her brother, she's only halfway joking. She adores her brother but claims I'm a saint for putting up with him. I remind her of that after she clicks her mug against mine and we chant our favorite toast. Balls, said the queen, if I had 'em, I'd be king. After taking a long, thirsty drink, I say, you can save your speech, sister. You were the one who warned me not to hook up with your brother. Nellie gulps her drink, then sighs in satisfaction. God, that's so good, and yes, I did. Though it shouldn't have been necessary, I figured no woman in her right mind would marry a man named Bram Stoker. She and Bram have told me how shamelessly their mother, a Stoker from Dublin, had played up her kinship with the infamous author of Dracula. Wife number one did, I said with a sly smile. I said, in her right mind. To my surprise, Nellie B drains her glass and holds it up for a refill. We always limit ourselves to 2 drinks that we sip slowly to make them last. You'd better refill yours too. You're going to need it. So you're really upset with me. I say it lightly, but with a rush of anxiety. I treasure her friendship and hate to think of us at odds. Oh, honey, she pushes her sunglasses to the top of her head and turns her gaze on me. The blue shirt turns her darkly fringed eyes to aquamarine, a lovely contrast to her pale skin. Anyone else who spent so much time on the golf course would be deeply tanned. She freckles instead, arms, legs, and across the bridge of her nose. Her expression's troubled. You know how much I adore you, Chris, but you're a damn fool for agreeing to this reunion. And my brother's a bigger one for putting you in such a position. He didn't pressure me. I agreed willingly. While true, it lacks conviction. If I know one thing about my husband of 5 years, it's his power of persuasion. It's one of the ways he reached the top of his game in TV ratings before age 30 and stayed there for 20 years. Now, despite his retirement a few years ago, reruns of his cooking show, Southern Heritage, are still much in demand, as are the pleas for him to film a new series. We both know that's behind this Return to the Lowcountry special. The Food Network has talked him into do it. Does he want to do the show again, despite his swearing otherwise? If not, then why the enthusiasm for this special? Nellie B and I have different answers to that, and she's here to argue hers. Okay. So that is just a little. Now, since I was going to be in an academic setting, I actually wrote something out that I wanted to say about Dottie instead of, you're going to tell some stories, right, and stuff like that. Well, I was going to do that, but then I was, trying to be very proper about the whole thing. So since I've written it, I'm just going to read it, okay? Much has been said about Dottie Frank, the person, but today seemed like the best occasion to say something about Dot Frank, the writer. I decided to put on my best schoolmarm persona for this discussion and talk about Dot Frank's writing style as if presenting her work to my students. So you're going to be my students. I'd do it as if I didn't know her personally. I'd be dispassionate and objective and discuss attributes that she had in her writing, such as the choice of point of view, the narrative flow, the use of metaphor, simile, and other poetic devices, character development, tone, theme, and so forth. But as I tried to lay out my talk, I saw that I couldn't do it. Like the epigram I want on my tombstone, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Yet I had trouble separating the woman from the works. Matter of fact, I found it impossible. Only when it hit me why I couldn't do it was I able to get to the heart of Dottie's writing style. Her works reflect her personality and her character in a way that I'm not sure I've seen before in another writer. And that's why her works will live on long after she's gone. They contain her heart, and it's evident in every book she wrote. When you talk about Dottie Frank, you're talking about her works. Let me illustrate by naming 3 of these attributes. Dottie was funny. She was so much fun to be around, and she had a sharp wit and an eye for the absurd. You will find that in each of her books. They're entertaining, and in some cases, like the best social satire, poke gentle fun at the absurd, not only in people, but in some of the situations we find ourselves in. Dottie was exuberant, as is her writing. Once Pat said to her, he called her Dotted One, by the way, Dotted One, didn't anyone ever tell you not to use so damn many quotation marks? She always had a great comeback to Pat's smart mouth, no matter what it was, so she responded, "Hey, fat boy, anyone ever tell you not to use so many adjectives?" The truth is, they both had a passionate exuberance for life that came through in their lively, colorful writing style. It was the kind of reading experience both loved. Pat often said that he read to be set on fire. I contend that he wrote that way, as did Dottie Frank. And finally, Dottie had a huge heart that brimmed with compassion. She showed that compassion for even her most unlovable characters. You won't find any dark, grim, pessimistic, miserable, cynical, joyless characters in her books. And as a reader, I'm grateful for that. I get enough of that reading the newspapers. But in my fiction, I want to hold on to the hope for a better world. So, students, you're about to go on an adventure reading the works of Dottie Frank. And I can promise you, it will be an enjoyable one. Thank you.
Ooh, that was great. I broke my paper mask. Can you hear me okay? We've been doing some events around this book, and in one event, I forget who said it, Cassandra, but someone said, well, Dottie was the female version of Pat Conroy, which is so true. So thank you for having me. This is this is such a wonderful way to celebrate Dottie. And I am going to read some poems, but I was thinking about the whole purpose behind her work here with the students is to, educate people about other ways you can make a living as a writer, or all the different aspects from finding a good agent, right, to an editor, to maybe selling a screenplay and other ways to make a living. And it dawned on me that the way she included my poems in her books was sort of embodied that. You don't read poems in the front of contemporary novels very often, particularly an entire poem. And when they print Dottie's books, it's close to 1 million copies. I mean, the first time I had a poem in one of her books, they printed 850,000 copies. That's a lot of eyes on a poem. But that's Dottie, and I'm going to tell you a couple of stories and read some poems, and they all kind of fit together. And it dawned on me that I wouldn't have really known Dottie if I didn't write poetry. And in this book, we included short essays about her, and I tell the story about the first poem I'm going to read, and I'll share it with you because it's so Dottie. We were at a party of Dottie Ashley's, whose husband used to teach theater here, right? And I met Dottie's husband, Peter, and he was talking about how he traveled a lot for work, and he liked to read poetry on airplanes because, you're always getting interrupted, but if you read a poem, you can get it completed, and it kind of stays with you. And I thought, that's so interesting. And we got talking about poetry, and I mentioned that my poems were at the Gibbs Museum in an exhibition about the Ace Basin. And for those of you who don't know, the Ace Basin is the largest area of preserved wetlands in North America. It's about an hour south of here. It's kind of amazing. And he said, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. My wife has a book coming out set in the Ace Basin. So he goes off and looks for her, and she's talking to my husband, Peter. And of course, her husband is Peter, and it's like we almost became best friends overnight. So that was a Saturday night, and that Sunday evening, and I only met her for 5 minutes or something, she came knocking at my door with my little poetry chapbook and a bottle of wine at like 9 o'clock at night and said, oh my God, I was down at the Gibbs Museum. I have to have one of your poems in my book. I'm like, seriously? Like, they put like Bible verses in poems and maybe a Shakespeare quote. Well, I didn't know that what Dottie wants, Dottie gets. And one of the things I loved and admired about her most was her ability to she'd set her eyes on something, even writing her first novel, which she wrote so she could make enough money to buy her mother's old house on Sullivan's Island, I think the story goes. I mean, so determined, and many times in my life I've thought, I think Cassandra and I have spoken about this. Dottie just didn't put up with any crap, and I guess we don't do that enough. So the poem is called River, and I want to start with that. I actually read it at her funeral, which was last year, and very hard to do that, but she loved this poem, and I think this was her favorite poem that I wrote. The river is a woman who is never idle. Into her feathering water fall petals and bones of earth's shed skins, while all around her edges men are carving altars. The river gathers flotsam, branches of time, and clouds loosening the robes of their reflections. Her dress is decoupage, yellow clustering leaves, ashes, paper, tin, and dung, wine, dark honey for the world, sweet blood of seeping magma pulsing above this carbon-starred sediment, striped with settled skulls, wing, and leaf spine. The river is an open-minded graveyard. Listen to the music of sunlight splitting inside her crystal cells. Magnet clock, cradle for the wind. The river holds a cup filling with miles of rain. But when the river sleeps, her celestial children break the sticks of gravity, grab fistfuls of fish-scented amber, clotted with diamonds, ferns, and pedaling clouds, adorn bracelets of woven rain, rise with islands of sweetgrass and stars strung to their backs, to wander over the scarred surface of the earth, like their mothers simply searching for the sea. So that's the first time my poem was included in a Dottie Frank book, and I have to tell you, I don't think a lot of her readers were familiar with contemporary poetry, because Dottie and I both got these hysterical notes like, I didn't know poetry could not rhyme, and things like that. But anyway, I don't mean to be judgmental, but it was a pretty funny experience. So after that, it was just kind of automatic that my poems would be in the front of her books. And her editor at the time, Gail Fortune, do you remember her? Did you know her? She's an agent now. She would send me the galley ahead of time, and sometimes I would write a poem for the book. Sometimes I already had something, but it was really a wonderful opportunity, and it just always worked. And as that happened, every book, I guess every year a new book came out. Our friendship grew. So we met through the poetry and the novel. And before you know it, our families became such good friends. Our children became friends. Our oldest son took Victoria to her first prom. When her son Will was married, my youngest son was in his wedding. So we became, it was almost really more like cousins, I would say. Lucky us. And, I was thinking when Cassandra was saying how generous Dottie was, generous in including my poems in her book, but she was the kind of person, if she met you, she'd have you over for dinner the way she did the students. She would stay in touch with you. She would, help you if you needed something. I used to always call her Dr. Dottie because she always knew medical stuff. I don't know. Anyway, really kind of an interesting bit, but she was that way. She just sort of completely embraced you, was so generous, and let you into her life in a way that is really unusual. And the other little thing I wanted to say, I don't think our sons ever called her Mrs. Frank. She was always Dottie. And she said, hey, I'm Dottie, that's the way she was. And I remember our youngest son must have been 8 or 9, and we hadn't known Dottie very long, but he loved Halloween, and she bought him these little bars of soap that looked like eyeballs. And he was I remember he brought them to school or something. He goes, yeah, my friend Dottie bought me these eyeballs, And that's what she was like. She was, just your immediate friend. And it was really wonderful for all of us to participate in this book because it was really cathartic. We've all spoken how it was great to have the opportunity to write something and process her death, which was quite sudden. And so I'm going to read a couple more poems, and I could sit up here and tell you Dottie stories, till tomorrow. But so a lot of Dottie's books were set on barrier islands, right? Isle of Palms, Polly's Island, Sullivan's Island, her first book. And I was living on one and writing a lot of poems about the place. And I was asked to write a poem about Barrier Island process for the National Science Foundation. So for all you poetry teachers, try that for an assignment. And they wanted it to be 10 lines. This was this project I did. So I wrote this poem called Barrier Island. It's very short, and they loved it and used it and everything. And Dottie put it in the front of Isle of Palms, which I think was her third book? Who's keeping track? I don't know. One a year, that's all I remember. Early one, yeah. Barrier Island. I think so. Where nothing is certain, we awaken to another night of delicate rain, falling as if it didn't want to disturb anyone. On and off, foghorns groan. The lighthouse beacon circles the island. For hours, melancholy waves tear whatever land we're standing on. Listen to the sea, rain dripping through fog, suspended at the edge of earth on a circle of sand where we are always moving slowly toward land. So that's in the front of Isle of Palms. And then there's quite a few others that are included in this book that were published in Dottie's novels. But like Cassandra, I was told about this book that Dottie wanted to write, Reunion Beach, and we were given some, not rules, but some ideas, but we were kind of allowed to write what we wanted to write. So I had this plan. I was going to interview Dottie's sister and her husband and her kids and stuff and get stories, more stories from her childhood, although many of them are fictionalized in her books. And then I just decided to imagine her whole life as if she'd never left the island that she was raised on, which is Sullivan's Island, and then imagined sort of all of us being together back there, like a reunion. And I grew up in a beach town myself and know that we have a lot of the shared experiences. So I'm going to read, this is kind of a long poem, but it's the poem for the book, Reunion Beach. The sea is calling us home. There is nothing stronger than that pull, each wave dispelling the patient passage of time, no beginning, no end in the horizon's blur, where gull feathers and stars are caught in wind, swirling above miles of sand, holding a crush of memories. Sandpipers scattered at the edges of low tide, green ribbon streams of seaweed sliding beneath your feet as you took your first stumbling steps toward the sweep of sea, your mother's hands on either side holding you up like warm wings. So many hours lost in the long sun, dribbling watery sand onto sandcastle walls, gathering shells in buckets, a red sneakerful carried home where bleached starfish lined windowsills and brown conches circled the garden like guards. Your favorite gray whelk held to your ear before you could sleep. You learned patience walking slowly through shallow water until you found the row of sand dollars cold beneath your feet, picking one up with your toes, holding it like a prize. Summer days spinning cartwheels in one direction, body surfing until the sun dissolved over the city and shrimp boats lit up in a line like a string of low-lying stars. Carving the name of your first crush into the hard sand far from the tide line, you smoked your first Marlboro on the overgrown path through wandering dunes. Standing at water's edge with your school friends, you watched blue and rust cargo ships slide by the island, wondering what lay below, dreaming of wherever they came from. You brought us the world of this island, its wax myrtles and palmettos, pelicans flying low along the shoreline, each beloved object of your home place lining the pages of your stories, like sand scattered between sentences. We will return in September, the month of your birth, the month of your death. We will retrace your footsteps, watch dolphins dip in and out of the waves as if they are following us, hear your laughter as gulls call back and forth between wisps of clouds, where we will see you in the radiant light. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you again to Cassandra, Marjorie, and Brett for these lovely tributes and stories about Dottie. Thank you so much. And now we get the pleasure of going out into the fresh air and having some snacks. So please go out there and we'll see you at the next event later at the end of October with Alan Hildebrand. Thank you.